The marketplace stank of desperation and unwashed bodies. Captain Ethan Harper stood with his arms crossed, glaring at the slaver who had just shoved a contract under his nose. "You're joking," Ethan said flatly. "I'm not marrying anyone, especially not some alien slave you picked up from a garbage scow." The slaver, a corpulent man named Greer with 3 chins and a perpetual sheen of sweat, smiled with all the warmth of a snake eyeing a mouse. "It's not a request, Captain. Your ship needs fuel. You need supplies. The Commonwealth Bank has frozen your accounts over that little incident on Vega Station. This is the only way you're leaving this planet." Ethan's jaw clenched. The incident had been him rescuing a group of kidnapped children, but apparently he destroyed too much private property in the process. Now he was broke, stranded, and apparently being strong-armed into a forced marriage. "Why does it have to be marriage?" Ethan demanded. "Loophole in the local laws," Greer explained, picking his teeth with a dirty nail. "Can't sell slaves off-world anymore, but spouses? Different story. You marry her, she becomes your legal dependent, and boom, you can take her wherever you want. I get my 5 credits. You get fuel money from the marriage registration bounty the governor's offering, and everyone wins." "Except the slave," Ethan muttered. "She's scaring," Greer said, as if that explained everything. "They're known for their distinctive aroma. Had her for 3 months and can't get rid of her. You're doing me a favor." Before Ethan could protest further, Greer whistled sharply. 2 guards dragged a figure from the shadows. Ethan's first impression was a silver hair, long, wild, and matted with dirt. Then he saw her skin, a pale green that reminded him of new spring leaves. She was thin, too thin, and covered in bruises, but it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were large and luminous, a startling violet color, and they burned with hatred so pure it was almost physical. She also smelled, not terrible exactly, but pungent, like overripe fruit mixed with something medicinal and sharp. "This is Kale," Greer announced. "Scaran female, age 21 in Earth years, healthy despite appearances. Totally legal sale, all papers in order." Kale's eyes fixed on Ethan, and she spat at his feet. She said something in a language he didn't understand, but the venom in her tone was universal. "She doesn't speak common?" Ethan asked. "She speaks it fine, just chooses not to." Greer shrugged. "So do we have a deal? I'm throwing in a translator chip for free." Ethan looked at the contract, then at Kale, then at his ship visible through the marketplace's grimy windows. The Drifter had been his home for 8 years. Without fuel, she was just an expensive piece of junk. He thought about walking away, about finding another solution. But the coldness of this world, literally and figuratively, was already seeping into his bones. Winter was coming on this frozen moon, and he'd heard stories about what happened to the desperate and homeless when the frost arrived. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth, "but I'm freeing her the moment we're off this rock." Greer's smile widened. "Sure you are, Captain. Sure you are." The ceremony, if it could be called that, took place in a dingy government office that smelled of mold and defeat. A bored clerk mumbled words neither Ethan nor Kale acknowledged. When it was done, Ethan had his fuel voucher and Kale had a silver band locked around her wrist, a marriage bracelet that doubled as a tracking device. In the Drifter's cargo hold, Ethan kept his distance. Kale sat in the corner, knees drawn up, watching him with those burning violet eyes. "Look," Ethan said finally, "I know this is terrible. I know you didn't choose this. As soon as we make the next jump and I can access a proper legal terminal, I'll start the annulment process. You'll be free to go wherever you want." Kale's expression didn't change. She said nothing. "You must be hungry." Ethan tried again. "I can make something. The galley's small, but—" "Why?" Her voice was rough from disuse, accented, but clear. "Why help me? Humans don't help Scarans. You think we're disgusting?" Ethan flinched. He couldn't deny that Scarans had a reputation. Their biology produced pheromones that most other species found unpleasant. They were often treated as undesirable, pushed to the margins of civilized space. "I don't think you're disgusting," Ethan said quietly. "I think you're a person who deserves freedom and dignity. That's all." For the first time, something flickered in Kale's eyes. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the tiniest crack in her armor of hatred. The first week was tense. Cale stayed in the cargo hold, refusing the cabin Ethan offered. She barely ate. When she did speak, it was usually to inform Ethan that she hoped his engine would explode. But slowly, things changed. It started when Ethan found Cale staring at the engine core, her head tilted in concentration. "The plasma injectors are misaligned," she said without looking at him. "That's why you're getting those vibrations in the port thruster." Ethan blinked. "You know engineering? Scarron's built half the jump drives in this sector." Cale said coldly, "Before your people decided we were only good for labor camps and brothels." She was right about the injectors. Ethan watched in amazement as she adjusted them with a piece of scrap wire and a multi-tool, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "My father was a master engineer," Cale said, and for the first time, her voice carried something other than anger. It carried grief. "Before they killed him." Ethan didn't push. But from that day forward, Cale began spending more time in the engine room. Her hands were never idle. She fixed things Ethan hadn't even known were broken. The ship ran smoother than it had in years. He noticed other things, too, when she thought he wasn't looking. Cale would stand at the observation window, staring at the stars with an expression of such longing it made his chest ache. She hummed sometimes while she worked. Strange, haunting melodies that reminded him of wind through canyons. And the smell he'd found so off-putting at first. He realized it changed with her emotions. When she was angry, it was sharp and acrid. When she was sad, it was sweet and melancholy. When she was focused on her work, it reminded him of rain on metal, clean and electric. One evening, Ethan made dinner, real food, not ration packs, and brought it to the engine room where Cale was rewiring a control panel. "Truce," he offered, holding out a plate. "I made Terran pasta. It's probably terrible, but it's hot." Cale stared at the plate for a long moment. Then, slowly she took it. They ate in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Companionable, almost. "Thank you," Cale said quietly, "for the food and for not treating me like property." "You're not property, Cale," Ethan finished gently. "You never were." 3 months passed. The annulment paperwork sat untouched in Ethan's desk drawer. They fell into a rhythm. Ethan handled navigation and cargo negotiations. Cale kept the ship running and helped with the more technical jobs his knowledge couldn't cover. They talked more about their past, their dreams, the thousand small things that make up a life. Ethan learned that Cale had been a university student before the raids, that she wanted to design starships, that she'd been in chains for 2 years before Ethan bought her freedom for 5 credits. Cale learned that Ethan had been a Commonwealth officer before he'd gone rogue, that he'd lost his family to a pirate attack, that he couldn't stand injustice even when fighting it cost him everything. One night, as they sat in the cockpit watching a nebula paint the darkness in shades of purple and gold, Cale reached out and took Ethan's hand. "I don't hate you anymore," she said softly. Ethan's heart stuttered. Somewhere along the way, Cale had become essential to him, not as an obligation or a responsibility, but as a partner, a friend, maybe something more. "I'm glad," he managed. "I never wanted you to." Cale turned to face him fully. In the nebula's light, her skin seemed to glow, and her eyes were impossibly deep. "The annulment papers," she said. "You haven't filed them." "No," Ethan admitted. "I kept meaning to, but I didn't want you to leave." He took a breath. "I know I have no right to ask you to stay. I know this started in the worst possible way. But Cale, somewhere along the way this stopped being about obligation or guilt. I care about you. Deeply." Cale's fingers tightened around his. "On Scarra, we have a saying," she said. "The deepest bonds are forged in the hottest fires." "Is that a yes?" Ethan asked, hardly daring to hope. "The marriage was forced," Cale said carefully. "But that doesn't mean we can't choose it now. Freely, equally." She leaned forward, and Ethan met her halfway. The kiss was tentative at first, then deeper, filled with all the longing and fear and hope they'd both been carrying. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "So," he whispered, "what do we do with the annulment papers?" Cale smiled. the first real smile he'd ever seen from her. And it was radiant. "We burn them," she said, "and we choose each other. Every day, for as long as we want." "Forever," then Ethan whispered. "Forever," Cale agreed. Outside, the stars wheeled on in their ancient dance. Inside the drifter, two souls who'd been broken and lost had found something neither had expected. Home. Not in a place, but in each other. The slave girl sold for 5 credits had become a partner, a friend, and finally the love of a lifetime. And the bitter captain who'd bought her freedom had found his own. Some loves, they both knew now, were worth every impossible odd,